to share?
The main thing I would just reinforce what Dr. Rummel said is that this needs to be a fully implementable plan. You can't leave these, it cannot be vague. You have to show that if you get funded in a month, you can roll it out and you have the whole thing ready to go. I mean, it really needs to be a fully developed plan, and they will see through it if it's not. So you just want to be as thorough as you can. You want to show that you know what you're doing and that you can start it on day one of funding.
Yes. Is it the Outback commercial, can't fake steak, right? I guess I'm just hungry for a late lunch, but you know, this is the one you can't, if it's not there, they'll see it, you know, like you said, it's got to be specific. And the absence of specificity is really kind of glaring in this. But remember, the agency, the announcement is going to guide you in that. It kind of tells you what you need to, you know, put in there. So if you start out simply by telling them what they say they want to hear, you're probably 80% of the way through your grant proposal before you even have to worry about whether you're, you know, it takes all the ambiguity out if you just comply with the requirements. Dr. Leslie?
No, I think that last point is basically what I was thinking as we say that. Like, don't overthink it too much, right? They lay out oftentimes the sorts of things they want to see. Hopefully, you're writing something that you have some expertise in. And then if you take what you know and what you understand to work and what you understand, how you understand those systems to work, the resources you have, and you fit it to what they're asking for, I think that it ends up being a really nice proposal. And so I would say make sure that you're paying attention and as Dr. Rummel just said, so what are those components that they're asking for, and making sure that you're addressing all of those pretty thoroughly.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the next slide, and this just doubles down on the specificity. Most proposals have a plan of operation or a management plan, sometimes both, but usually elements of these are combined. Very important, and it usually flows fairly directly from the design section. So here, it literally breaks everything down into detail, but it breaks it down into a task by time grid that allows a reviewer to see literally everything you're going to do during this project. So you'll see that this organizational plan of operation details like every step of the project from the very beginning until the very end. Simply has to be expressed in behavioral, observable, and measurable terms. That's a mouthful. But they have to sort of know, allow people to how are you going to know it when you see it? And if you can express it in terms that are easy to measure and can be observed, then you want to leave that out of this section, because they're really looking for this linear approach, everything you're going to do, and how will you know it? So you start out with activities and key tasks. And the way we tend to do these is we sketch out everything. And this is the guiding question. What are we going to do from the day this grant gets funded until the day it ends? And you list out all those activities broken into subtasks. Then you put start and end dates to each one, okay? Associated with each major task. Then you're going to put your personnel, your staff, or your consultants who are going to be chiefly responsible for each activity, so that they can see in there. This informs the management side of the plan, right? Milestones and deliverables. So we'll know we've achieved this target when this has occurred, or when this product has been developed, when we've recruited the requisite 12 trainees for this year, when we've enrolled 100 people into the intervention, when 20% of our participants have attained the outcome that we want them to, et cetera. The management structure is often included here, and we focus on lines of responsibility, of authority, budgetary management, also communication. So how do the different people and the different roles and the different organizations fit together to manage and execute and operate the project? Usually this section includes is put into what's called a work plan, or sometimes called other things, but a work plan or management plan. And they tend to be one for each year of the project, because the funding is usually dispersed 1 year at a time. So they may want to see each of your individual 5-year plans, and then put together, it creates the overarching 5-year plan. So it sounds kind of daunting in a way to chart out all the activities of a 5-year project and then figure them out. But once you lay them out step by step, and I usually encourage, folks to list them out first, everything that needs to happen. Don't worry now about when or who or how it's going to be observed or measured. Just list them out, and then you can break them down and go one by one, task by task. When would we start this? Well, we'd start it before this, but before this one, but after this one. And then you start sort of filling it out from there. So you don't have to have the whole thing conceptualized as you go. It starts with those activities, and you cross-index with it, with your personnel, and then the timelines become easier to loop in there. We could go on a lot on this one, Dr. Leslie, Dr. Gooden. It's a very important part. It becomes sort of the guiding document for how you get started when you get funded. But anything on this plan of operation management plan, sometimes these are kind of tedious to write. They don't really satisfy the creative writing itch that we get in articulating this problem into exciting research and training operations. This is sort of the detail side of things, but it's very, very important.
And it's where you learn to put information in concise tables, because you have to make it within the font that they give you, but it cannot take up a whole lot of space. So you have to be very creative in making it say everything it needs to say, but not take too many pages.
Good point.
I find working on this section helpful when I'm working on a proposal, just because it does help you sketch out. It requires you to sketch it out in such detail. I think it's just real. I found it like when you do this section, I've always walked away feeling like I have a better idea of what my plan is and what our plan is.
Yeah.
And I find it can be tedious, but it can also be really helpful. And as you kind of try to visualize and look at step by step how this is going to get laid out and done.
I would expect an evaluator to say that exactly, that you lay it out in this way. And I asked Michael for some advice a few days ago, and he sent me a logic model about my inputs and outputs and things like that. So if we all followed it step by step like this, though, we really, I think it would work more efficiently, wouldn't they? They sure would. So let's go on to the next slide. Dr. Gooden, this is the section on utilization, technical assistance, dissemination. It's known by any number of names, but it's what we're going to do with the results of the project, right?
Mm-hmm. And the important thing is, if you say you get a grant for a year or you get a grant for 5 years, you don't want it to be a one and done project. You want your project to create something that will last past the funding period. And so you really want to be thoughtful about, all right, what are we going to do during the 5 years that we're funded? And then how are we going to ensure that what we learn is carried on? And your funders want to know that too. So you talk about how you're going to share the findings, what kind of products will you do? What kind of conference presentations will you give? And you're very specific about how you will share products and presentations and data as you go. You talk about where the data will be stored and the kinds of data registries that you will use for your data. Technical assistance based on your finding is an important part of what you're doing. You want to be able to say, we're going to share information here in these places with these audiences. We're going to take what we learn and we're going to share it with others. That's the point of funding, is to share the research across the country or the world for that matter. We want to state how it's accessible information, web-based, whether information will be through the web, whether it be hard copy, face-to-face, all the different ways that information will be shared. Again, all the different ways that you'll share it. You can do seminars, are you going to do conferences, are you going to do trainings? All the different ways that you will share the information with different audiences, different stakeholders. How you use social media, very important now. Show that you've got the specifications to use sophisticated social media. How many publications do you expect to get from this work? And includes the specific numbers, as we've talked about before. How many products do you expect to put out each year? How many target audiences will be reached? They want to see those numbers, and we generally estimate generously, and it's a goal that we think we can reach. So we might reach 5,000 stakeholders through seminars over the course of a year, or we may produce 12 white papers over the course of the project. So state what projects, how many you anticipate, and then you really need to deliver on those. And anything else that's in the funding announcement about how they want you to disseminate, you want to make sure you pay attention to that and say that you will disseminate in the ways that they ask. Frequently, you have to attend the federal conferences once a year, and you get to share your information there. So again, pay attention to the proposal itself for what they require in terms of dissemination.
I heard someone once say that in this dissemination plan, you want to overpromise and then overdeliver. So you're estimating, but you want to show a very active and aggressive campaign of dissemination and technical assistance. Maybe aggressive isn't the right word, but say productive, right? And then once you do it, you want to exceed those numbers, because they'll look and each year you can say, we said we do 4 per year presentations and we did 7, and they note that, and it looks like if you exceed it. So you want to show a lot of activity so that the reviewers will know that you've got a very strong plan in place. And then you want to make sure that you meet those metrics because you've established them really for yourself. Dr. Leslie, I don't want to shortchange this discussion, but I want to get to your perspective on the evaluation and quality assurance section. Could we skip right along to that one?
Yeah, excellent information from Dr. Gooden. Thank you.
So the next slide is evaluation and quality assurance.
Yeah, so obviously near and dear to the work that we're doing here at the evaluation unit and at the Human Development Institute. Just going over some components here. The first thing is specifying the different required data elements, collection, and storage procedures. So metrics, what are you going to measure? And again, the kind of catch-all theme of evaluation is you do what you measure, right? And you measure what you do. So it's important to lay the foundation of how and what you're going to measure on your projects, and that's really going to inform the work. And as a lot of us know that have studied human psychology or human behavior, we understand that it really becomes a feedback loop. So you look at what you look at is what you pay attention to, and what you pay attention to is what you tend to work on more and what you tend to emphasize and focus on. And so I don't think it can be understated, at least in my evaluative mind, maybe, how important it is that we are asking the right questions and measuring those things appropriately. Sometimes we can get caught up by, or I can speak for myself. Sometimes I know I've gotten caught up by kind of laying out the wrong questions or tracking data in a way that I found to be ineffectual or not very helpful. And that can kind of drag a project down a little bit. And so making sure that you have set those, and this ties back into what Dr. Gooden just said and what Dr. Rumrow just said with a lot of what your milestones are, right? So your milestones, you're going to want to figure out, you don't know what your milestones are until you know how you're going to measure those things, right? And so they sort of go hand in hand. And so your evaluation is going to tell you if you're on track, if you're, as Dr. Rumrow mentioned, maybe over delivering. Are you ahead of schedule on certain things? It's really going to provide you that feedback loop to look at how is this project going in the moment. And so that's how you tie into kind of quality assurance, because you're going to be able to look at that data, hopefully in real time, or as real time as possible as you update that, to give you feedback on how are things going, right? How is the project going? Are we hitting our milestones that we set forth in our plan to be able to hit? And if not, what needs changed, right? That drives the conversation. Okay, we're a little behind here. What are some things that we can address and tweak to make sure that we can kind of catch up on these different elements of the plan? The evaluation also becomes really critical, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but it also becomes really critical in sustainability, and as Dr. Gooden mentioned earlier, rightfully so, thinking about future opportunities. And so if we're testing an intervention, for example, how we measure everything and the data we collect is going to be really important in the future, and talking about why this was or was not a successful trial, right? So it's going, and that's going to drive a lot of the research that maybe ends up happening as a result of this project, and it might justify or not justify whether this project should be replicated, right, or continued. So those are going to be really important parts. You can get really down in the weeds of the technical part of how you're going to collect data, but it can be really important. Setting up that database ahead of time, having technical expertise in understanding what type of data you need to collect, making sure you have the right software and the infrastructure and the people that know how to collect that data. Those individuals also might end up needing to train the people that are actually like boots on the ground doing the work on how to collect that data and report that data and enter that data into a system, for example. You want to make sure that you have data security kind of at the top of your priority list too as you go through this. So they're going to ask you, and you're going to have to talk about your security and your storage procedures, especially if you're dealing with personal identifiable information, right? So making sure that those things are under lock and key and are being handled appropriately are going to be really important. Your evaluation plan is naturally going to be tied directly to those objectives. So the metrics are going to be tied to the goals. So, as we do a logic model, we're going to look at the goals, and then everything is going to kind of flow naturally out of what our goals are. What metrics we have, our short-term, medium or intermediate and long-term goals, all should reflect what the purpose of the grant is. If you have some goals and some metrics, that have nothing to do with what you said you were going to do, then somebody's going to look at that and be really confused, and you're not going to get a great score for that. So you're going to, one thing we mentioned here is qualitative and quantitative data. Anymore, you want to make sure that you are doing your due diligence and you're collecting quantitative data, but you're also adding in elements of qualitative data, especially as we talk about participatory action research and including the people that the individuals, consumers that the research might be on, making sure that we're getting feedback from them. That might look like satisfaction surveys for training programs, that might look like interviews, that might look like focus groups or forums, right? So there's all kinds of different ways that might manifest and might be included in your evaluation plan and how you're going to look at that. The logic model becomes a visual representation of the entire project. And to Dr. Rumbrell's point, I think once you get into logic models, you might get really caught into them because they're really beautiful in kind of just laying everything out and understanding kind of the flow of how everything works in the project. So for me, some people are visual learners, some people are not, but for those that are visual learners, logic models can be really helpful. And I think that as a reviewer, they really like to see the flow and how each component, whether, the goals then flow into the inputs, which are our partners and our resources, the staff, the different agencies and organizations that are going to be working with you, that flow into the outputs. Those could be the individuals that you're serving and the activities. So, just for example, we just did a logic model. We were talking about what activities we're going to do. So the goals set forth what we want to do, and then we looked at our resources, and then we determined what are the activities that we're going to perform here, and then who are the participants, who's going to receive these services that we're providing. And then out of that, we look at outcomes. So what are the short-term outcomes, the intermediate and the long-term, and you always want to try to be able to tie in a metric to those. Many of us are familiar with SMART goals. So you want to make sure it's smart, it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, right? It's timely. So we want to maybe look at monthly goals. And then at the long term, we're looking at bigger picture impacts, those sorts of things. And that could be really relevant to provide that context. And kind of tie it all back together is here's the long-term impact, what we hope the legacy of this project will be.
Dr. Leslie, I'm thinking that Bob Dylan would have been a lousy program evaluator. He said you don't need a weather person to know which way the wind blows, but maybe you do, or maybe you at least need an evaluator or an evaluation plan to know whether your project met its intended objectives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way of putting it.
Let's go on to the next, in deference to our time here, we'll go on to the next slide. Thank you for that, Dr. Leslie. This one's on project staff and personnel. I'll go through this fairly quickly here. Every grant you'll write has a section that includes the names and the credentials of all personnel who'll be associated with the project, including consultants. Provide a usually brief narrative description of people's credentials and their qualifications. Resumes and CVs are included often as appendices, and do refer to the guidelines in the application for how that information should all be presented. Some will require a one-page summary resume, some allow full curriculum vitae, things like that. What training and experience do project staff have in the particular areas of focus for this particular project that you're working on? The applicant organizations, hiring and personnel, human resource policies, and this would include affirmative action, equal employment opportunity, and DEI policies and practices is becoming increasingly important, as it should, including time commitments and specific responsibilities for each person. Sometimes this is a duplicate of what's in a budget justification, but that's okay if they call for it here. We find that it's always best to name personnel when you can. If you know who's going to be working on a project, make sure you put their name in there. It's not as attractive to reviewers to see a bunch of to be named, that you're going to get this grant and do a whole bunch of hiring. They like to see that you've lined up a team who have names and credentials associated with them. So you want to name folks in there as often as you can. This also related to one of the bullets above, we'll often have a question about the overall diversity within the project team, including all elements of diversity and human variation. But in our work, there will sometimes be special notice and special mention about whether people with lived experience with disability are included as part of the team. So if you're working, if you've got folks on the team who represent those diversities and they're comfortable sharing their status on any of those underrepresented characteristics, with federal grants at least, it almost always helps to disclose any of that information if people are willing to do that. Dr. Gooden, Dr. Leslie, I want to get on to this one about resources and organizational capacity, if you don't mind, and we'll hear from everyone on one. This is often the final section of a proposal, and this describes the lead applicant and all partners in terms of their experience in working on projects that are similar to this, the adequacy and accessibility of their resources and facilities, the physical resources, the technology resources, etc. Experience with similar or related projects, so not just in this particular space, but have you had grants in this area before? They will sometimes want to know What are the administrative supports, the financial infrastructure? What I talked about technology and communication infrastructure as well. So they want to make sure that you have the capacity to carry out this project. And these are usually between 5 and 10% of the overall points on a project. But if an organization just doesn't have the capacity for it, even if they get good scores in other areas, that'll come out in other ways and you won't get the grant. So it's very important to show the capacity of the overall organization. The cost share and in-kind contributions we've talked about before. And here's a place to give the fullest accounting of your organization's capacity and resources. I put in here no extra points for humility, you know, and if you did it, it ain't bragging, I guess. And they want to see that that the grant is going to a place that has the capacity, has the experience, and has the expertise. Some grants will want to go to fledgling organizations that are just getting started, but when possible, you want to show the fullest possible accounting of everything that you and your partners have to offer. Sometimes we will bring partners in as subcontractors or consultants because they bring important capacity in one of these areas, perhaps in an area that we're not as strong in. And often they'll call and ask us to collaborate in areas of our own strength. And I'm thinking, Dr. Leslie, about the work in evaluation, where other universities and state governments and hospitals contact you and your team quite often to assist with their evaluation projects. So it's all part of the collaborative network that goes on. And Dr. Gooden, what else would you say about the organizational capacity part?
I have nothing to add, Dr. Rummel. It's excellent.
Dr. Leslie?
Yeah, I would ditto. Yeah.
I'm sorry we ran through these last two fairly quickly, folks. We did want to pause. Dr. Bauer, I'm looking at the time, and I wanted to have a little bit of time for a few questions. Do we have any in the chat at this time?
We do not have any questions in the chat at this time. We do have a question that just appeared. The question is from John. How would you manage a grant review decision not to fund in which feedback is not provided on your proposal? Overall, how do you make improvements on grant writing without feedback from reviewers?
John, I think you've been reading my mail. We need to talk afterwards, as we run into this fairly often. No, not often, but it certainly does happen. And you'll see this. You see this in other things. You see it in. It's really frustrating when you submit a journal too for publication, and they say, "Yeah, it's not. It's you know, it's we're not going to accept the article, but you know, there's no criticisms in it. You know." And sometimes what happens, scores on some of these grant competitions are so high, and your proposal has to be so good to get, you know, to get funded. Some federal agencies, your scores have to be in the mid to high 90s out of 100 to be considered for funding. So if you miss by 1 point or 2 points, you still don't get it. And so having a good score, even in the fundable range, and not getting it can be for a number of reasons. One is you might have missed something. Another is someone just might have gotten a few extra points than you did, and you congratulate and commend them, you know, when that happens. But when there's not specific feedback of any kind, you can contact the project officer. We usually don't do that to complain unless there's been an arithmetic error or a misstatement of fact, but we ask for feedback to improve. Sometimes agencies will say, this was in the fundable range, but you weren't funded. We'd encourage you to reapply, and you can make changes, and you can do those kinds of things as well. But we've had a growing phenomenon of good scores that don't end up being funded, and our colleagues around the country have too. The scores just have to be higher on funded proposals than they used to be. And so you'll have these things that have very little criticism, and you're not sure what there is to work with. But if you have a 96 and someone got a 97, you know, there's really not much you can do to correct it, particularly if everything was, you know, you just missed a point, you know, here or there. And sometimes there's really nothing you can do except put in another proposal in the next competition. But broader response, reaching out to the funding agency and asking them for clarification or feedback is always good. I will tell you, John, that it's uncommon that there's just no feedback whatsoever. These reviewers are quite thorough, and they will go through, and these are for federal proposals, and they'll give pretty detailed feedback. Sometimes even when you get funded, there'll be criticisms or suggestions, and you'll have to respond to those before you're actually funded. But if it looks like that page of feedback is missing, or if there just wasn't anything to substantiate a score that didn't put you in that range, always fine to respectfully and professionally reach out to the project officer. And beyond that, if they won't give you information on it, there's often not too much you can do. So we're encouraged by a good score, even when it's not funded. We look to find another place for it. After the initial, like, oh, wow, did we just spend the last 6 weeks putting that together and did it all go for nothing? No, it didn't go for nothing, because we'll reuse it. We'll do elements of it again. We'll find another spot for it. But persistence is definitely the key there. Dr. Gooden, Dr. Leslie?
I would add too, look at the website and look to see who was funded this year and last year. See what they're looking for
Yep.
and who they fund.
Sure. And contact them. We've done this before. Often we know the people. We contact them. We congratulate them. We talk to them about their proposal. We follow the progress on it. We can learn from them. They'll want to learn from us when we prevail. These are our competitors, but it's in inclusion fields. It's usually a friendly competition, and it's a great way to reach out and make connections and to see who prevailed in that. Who knows? They may have a role for you in looking at some of their data or getting involved. Once people get funded, they don't tend to mind sharing. They're not going to share their proposal with you while it's going on, but once they announce it, make some friends and find out what they did. And I don't know, Dr. Leslie, Dr. Gooden, if anyone ever contacted me about a proposal we got funded, I'm more than happy to talk to them about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I can attest to that. I've seen it happen, but yes, totally agree.
Dr. Bauer, anything else?
We have a comment from Catherine, and the comment is, thank you to all. This was very helpful.
Appreciate it, Catherine. Thanks for joining us. And thanks to one and all for taking time to be here with us today. Dr. Gooden and Dr. Bauer, we really appreciate the opportunity to take part in the fall seminar series. To my colleagues on the panel, Dr. Gooden, Dr. Leslie, thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us. I believe we have our email contacts if anybody has any questions or comments, and we can hold and hang around for a few additional questions. But I'd like to just close by thanking you all for your time and attention today, and let you know how much we appreciate everything you all do to help people with disabilities achieve their goals and realize their dreams. Let's keep at this. Thank you all. Dr. Gooden, Dr. Leslie, anything to say in closing?
Thank you, Dr. Rummel. I second what you said.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for joining us, everyone.